Welcome back to the channel, and in today's video, I'm going to show you just how easy it really is to build a plane, a helicopter, and a hovercraft in this game. Now, there's a reason that almost every time I want to replicate a real-life flying vehicle, like some type of helicopter or plane combo, that I always go to Trailmakers to do these recreations. And that's because out of all the games I play, Trailmakers is the easiest to get from nothing to a functional vehicle. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that you can't get super complex and overly complicated and technical with your builds. But what I love about the way that these parts are designed is that it makes it really easy to just get started and get going very quickly. And I'm going to try to demonstrate that by building a very simple plane, helicopter, and hovercraft that in other games would take much longer to do. So for a plane, you don't really need a whole lot. Trailmakers conveniently has something called air control already built into the seats themselves. So technically you don't even have to program any controls. So in order to make a plane, it's actually relatively intuitive. First thing you're going to need is some power. So get a propeller, slap it on the front, and look at that, we've got power. And as we get off into the air here, you'll notice that we're kind of already able to fly. If I press S, I lean back. If I press W, I lean forward. And if I press A and D, I roll, which doesn't really give me that much control. But don't worry, we're slowly gonna add the necessary pieces to make this thing a functional plane. I mean, we're already most of the way there. So up next, we're gonna have to add some wings. We need some lift on this thing. But in order for this thing to have any stability, we're gonna need a tail. So it's nice if the tail has a little bit of a separation from the front wings. So for the tail, I'm just gonna use tail fins. I'm gonna use simple tail fin for the horizontal stabilizers and a just regular old tail fin for the vertical stabilizer. And now let's see how we're doing. Remember, I programmed nothing. All I've done is place parts down, and this is what I have so far. It actually feels pretty nice. Now the controls are very slow and I can't really pitch down, and the only reason is because my lift is a little bit too far forward. So there's a really easy solution to that. If you're pitching up, move your wings back. If you're pitching down, move your wings forward. So now I should be a little bit more level as I fly here. And it still pitches up a little bit because I do have more lift on the front than on the tail. But as you can see, pull up, relatively functional considering I've got zero programming on this thing. So now I can fly around the map in a really dumb looking simple plane. But what if I actually want this thing to be controllable? What if I want to really control it? How complicated do I have to get here? Well, once again, not very complicated. Here, I'm just going to extend the tail back a little bit, fill it in, and then just give it a little bit of a gap here that I can add a control surface to. And I'm just gonna add a steering hinge. So I'll just fill this gap with 2 steering hinges that are gonna go up and down to give me pitch. And you can program these to whatever buttons you want, but I prefer that when the tail goes up, we're pitching up, and that to me is the S button. And then the other direction to pitch down is just going to be W. But the key thing here is you want to turn steering help all the way down, because that's going to change how responsive your controls are depending on how fast you're going. And the angle, I like it to be a little bit less than 30 degrees. And the speed, I'm gonna actually lower that as well, just so it's not too twitchy. So now we can do a quick control surface test and see that W and S are gonna help me pitch forward and pitch up and down. So now I wanna add some better roll to this thing. So up in the front here, I'm just gonna create a 1 block gap on either side, and then I'm gonna take these rotating servos, and this is gonna be my steering. And I believe by default, they're already going to be the right controls for A and D just by placing them on the sides. But as you can see, the control values are way over exaggerated. So all I'm gonna do is change the angle to like 15 degrees and the speed to like 30%. And now it looks like this, which seems much more reasonable. But because I moved the tail back, I'm actually gonna move these back a little bit too, because we need some more weight in the front. Let's make it look a little bit nicer by capping off these wings like that. And now let's see how this thing feels. I should have much more full and agile control of this thing. But first, I gotta get myself off the aircraft carrier here. There we go. And look at this thing. It flies very level when we're going straight. I actually could probably lower the speed on my roll because it's very twitchy, which might be, I mean, it feels, look how it feels though. It feels so smooth. And even pitch is really nice. If anything, I think I could just use perhaps a little bit more thrust. So that's one thing that is also pretty easy to fix. So I'm gonna convert this thing from a propeller plane to a jet plane. And in doing that, I'm just gonna have some fun making this thing a little bit more aerodynamic. Where are these pieces? I always forget where the nose cones are. I'm gonna add a nose cone on this thing. I'm gonna add just a couple of extra aerodynamic pieces like this, just to make it look a little bit nicer. And then I'm gonna take some Dragon jet engines and attach them to our body right here. All right, let's see how this feels. All right, we have a much more speed. Oh my goodness, a little bit too twitchy now. I really, the faster you go, the bigger the effect of your control surfaces as the wind blows by them. But as you can see, we are a very functional jet right now. Look at this agility we have. We're basically a Blue Angel at this point. Like, you don't really need much more function out of a plane than this in Trailmakers. And as you can see, it was really intuitive, super easy. Not really an issue at all to get from nothing to a fully functional jet. Now, helicopters aren't quite as easy as this, but they're still not as complicated as you would expect, given how complicated real-life helicopters actually are. Look at that wonderful landing. Now, if you want the absolute easiest time to build what may be considered a helicopter, but you're gonna be a derpy helicopter at that, it's as simple as taking a regular old seat and just attaching a single propeller to the top of it. And with just a single press of a button, you can fly around just by holding space and using your seat controls. But as you can see, there's a little, it's not the most controllable. Sometimes you go in directions you don't really want to go because you don't really have full control of this thing. But Trailmakers actually, it makes it pretty easy to add controls onto things. But we're not going to be using this propeller for a helicopter. We're going to be using another type of propeller. So just using these blocks here, I'm going to build out a pretty basic and simple helicopter shape, like just the body of a helicopter. I'll add some wedge blocks for some aerodynamics like that. And yeah, see, we're already looking like a helicopter here. Now, the important thing about helicopters in Trailmakers is don't focus on the tail propeller. Like, just ignore the tail propeller because that's going to give you way more trouble than it's worth. Instead, you're going to want 2 layers of counter-rotating rotors on the helicopter. And the way that you can do that is a very handy helicopter engine version 2, not version 1, but version 2, because this allows you to stack them on top of each other. And then you just want to reverse the controls of one of them so that they're going in opposite directions. And I recommend probably putting them up to max speed might help. So then if you attach the helicopter blades to the helicopter engines, you're going to have yourself a helicopter propeller. And actually, I just realized I do not want my controls to be W and S for a helicopter because that's going to be pitch and roll. So instead, you just want to set one of them to space and then the opposite one to space and delete the other control. So space will trigger both propellers in opposite directions. And as you can see, we're already flying. We're a helicopter. But obviously, there's some more work to be done with this. First of all, I got to move this back a little bit because clearly... yeah, there we go. Now we're leaning forward. But we're gonna add some tail and stuff to this thing. But actually, this is pretty much... We've got some functionality here on this thing. It's a stick. We're pretty much a stick with blades, but somehow we're still flying. And see, this is what I mean. It's so easy to get from nothing to function. The minimal steps from point A to point B. All right, but we got a little bit more going on with helicopters here. So I'm gonna add myself a tail fin like that, and I'm also gonna add myself some small tail fins just to give some extra stability to the tail as we're pitching. But now that's gonna give us a lot of resistance in the tail, so when you see when we go up, our tail just pulls us back a lot. So we're gonna have to counteract that a little bit up in the front, just by adding a set of normal wings up in front of the main propellers. And as you can see, it's not perfect yet, but this helicopter still needs some extra weight to it. When your helicopter has more weight to it, it tends to feel a little bit more stable and able to actually pull itself through the air because of the momentum it can carry. So I'm gonna add a 50 kilogram weight underneath the cockpit there. That may be a little bit too far forward, but as you can see, it's already flying really, really steady, actually. Look at this. This is way better. Just the addition of that weight just made this thing way better. All right, I'm gonna move it back slightly though, and then make it look a little bit nicer just by adding some wedge blocks. So it's not just this weird block sticking out from the body there. All right, so with this, we pretty much have a mostly functional helicopter. It's not very agile yet. And I haven't really put any controls into this thing other than the main rotor. But here's where the simplicity of Trailmakers also comes in handy, is because using more of these helicopter rotors, we can use helicopter engine 1 just by attaching this to the side of my vehicle here. I'm gonna do 1 for now just so I can see when I press my buttons, it's actually already perfect. When I press S and W, it actually, it pitches me forward and back, just like that. So now I have pitch. And just for symmetry's sake, I'm gonna add 1 to the other side, but I have to reverse the controls since it's on the opposite side. And then I'm going to select both of them and lower the speed down to like 2, just because it was a little bit extreme. So now my pitch feels like this. Yeah, definitely feels way, way better. Could probably be slightly... No, actually, it's good. I think we're good. I think we could use a little bit more yaw so we can turn this helicopter. So now I'm just going to add another one of these. And I'm just going to put it on the bottom down here. This one I'm going to make a little bit stronger since it's just the one by itself. Got to make sure it's on A and D for my turning. So now... Oh, wrong way. Trial and error on these things, and it doesn't actually tell you which direction it's going to spin until you do it. But now... I've got yaw, no problem. Pitch and yaw. I could actually probably up my pitch a little bit. Maybe lower the yaw just a little bit as well. I have a pretty functional helicopter. I don't even have landing gear, but you don't really need it. You don't really need landing gear. So yeah, the tail fin helps keep us going in the direction that we're facing whenever I turn. And then all the servos is gonna help us be a little bit more agile in the air. Not really complicated programming. We don't have to program a whole swash plate or anything, although you could kind of do something like that if you want to get really, really complicated in Trailmakers. But my whole point is, you don't need to. You can get flying without getting too complicated. All right, so there's a simple helicopter. Now let's get on to a hovercraft. Now this is where Trailmakers kind of is almost cheating in a way, because you don't need to actually build hover functionality into it at all. Because you can literally just slap a seat down on a slab and then use just literal hover blocks to make this seat hover. And there you go. Now we're hovering. We have a hovercraft. But obviously we have an issue. We've got no propulsion. So let's go ahead and add some propulsion. So for this, I'm actually going to add some mini thrusters. What I like about mini thrusters is they're very, very consistent and quiet. So I'll just add 2 of those. And we've already got a functioning hovercraft. It's just not the best for functionality. Here, let's go over actual land so we have places to go instead of being stuck on this aircraft carrier. The good thing about hovercrafts, or hover pads, is if you're going fast enough, you can go over water too. So right now, I've got a functioning hovercraft, but it's not as functional as I would want it to be. So one way I could add steering is the same way I did with the helicopter, and just use a rotating servo and set it to A and D, and now you can see I can turn very, very agile. I can turn very quickly in place without too much of an issue. So I already have my turning problem pretty much solved, but there's actually something I prefer better for hovercrafts, because one big downside to hovercraft is how floaty they are. So if I go to turn to the right here, I'm facing to the right and my thrust is going to the right, but as you can see, when I turn, like, it's not the quickest response time to when I start going in the direction I want to go. It's very, very floaty because my momentum is going forward, but when I face to the left, my momentum doesn't stop going forward just because my thrust is now going left. They kind of combine together until eventually all of my thrust is now going in the other direction. But there's a really simple way to deal with that that makes it feel a lot more like driving a car than floating across ice. And it also is going to replace our turning controls. So I'm not going to use that at all for turning anymore. Instead, I'm going to use the rotating servos. So if you just use the aerodynamics with tail fins, just like that. Let me see if these are going, nope, these are not going in the right direction, and that angle is way too sharp. So let me just reverse these, set the angle to like 30, let's go 25 degrees. And the speed, I like 0.3. There we go. So now we're actually going to be able to turn ourselves. However, as you can see, this doesn't really work that well yet because there's a secret. There's one extra thing that needs to happen here. In order for the turning to happen effectively, there needs to be some stationary air resistance up in the front too. So if I just add another set of fins up in the front like this, I know they're sticking off and it looks terrible, but I'm just going for super simple right now. That should actually fix our problem. So now, when we turn, you can see it actually turns us more. And that's because the front will end up catching some of the air resistance and face us in the direction that we want to go. So now when I turn, you can see I no longer float way off to the side anymore because I'm catching air resistance from the side due to those tail fins. It actually feels a lot more like just driving a drifty car rather than driving a zero friction ice wheel machine. And if you want to just get a little bit more fun with your creation to get a little bit more speed out of it too, is pay attention to your aerodynamics. As you can see, some of these blocks are not very aerodynamic, so just adding some wedges to cut through that air a little bit more, it goes a long way. Here, I'll add some of these to the front of these, add some up here too, and just like that, we're probably already going to be way faster. Yeah, look at this. Here, let me go out on the water again so we can see we have a lot more of a flat, neutral playing field to try this thing out on. Oh my goodness, we're going really fast. Oh, there we go. All right, here we are. Man, we're hovering really high off the surface here. I can lower that. I can lower that in the settings. Now watch as I turn around this pillar. Rather than going way out to the side. Oh boy. Okay, I need to... That was actually really bad. All right, I'm gonna adjust the angle down to 15 degrees instead of 25 degrees here. All right, let's see if we can cut around this pillar now. Whoa, boy. All right, it was a little sketchy. It was a little sketchy, but much less, we didn't float out that much. We were able to be much more accurate with our turning a little bit. I think I might be hovering too high off the water here. Let's adjust these settings. All right, let's put the distance down to 0.5, the minimum distance. See if that feels more stable. All right, here we go. Yeah, we're much closer to the water. It feels a lot more stronger of a cushion of the hover pads. So let's see how this treats us as we go around this pillar now. All right, there we go. Yeah, it's not like the flattest and most stable thing, but like with the amount of effort I put into this vehicle, it's really good. It's not perfect. It could definitely be way, way better, and you could fine tune and tweak this thing by spending more time on it. But the point is, we've got something functional, and it was super easy to get there. So yeah, if you've ever wondered why 95% of my vehicle recreations are in Trailmakers, this is why. It's just because this game was made for vehicles, and it makes it really easy to just get functionality out of vehicles. So I hope you guys learned something today if you actually play Trailmakers. And if you don't play Trailmakers, I hope you found it interesting to see how Trailmakers works when it comes to building simple vehicles. Or actually complex vehicles, but in a simple way. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, you'll probably enjoy some more that you can find right here on the end screen. Hope this video has earned your subscription. Anyway, this has been ScrapMan, and I'll see you next time. Bye.